I'm here with my friend Wayne, and we're going to talk about his entry into the contest today. Wayne, tell me about this car. What make, model, year?
Okay, it's a 1971 Mercedes, of course, 300 SEL 3.5. Most of the Mercedes built were 4.5s, and the reason for that is when the U.S. came out with the emissions controls, Mercedes knew that they had to up the engine size to offset the emissions. And so an interesting story about that is when they built these cars for the U.S. market, they didn't want the German market to know that they was building a 4.5 for the U.S. market because they would want the 4.5.
Right.
And so they actually, as the cars came down the assembly line, they actually labeled them, each and every car, as a 3.5 and put the 4.5 emblem in the glove box with instructions to the dealers when the car arrived at the dealership to change it out. That's a true story.
That does not seem entirely honest.
Well, actually, the bottom line is the 3.5 really is better than the 4.5 because even though, when we're talking about that, we're talking about the engine, 3.5 or 4.5. Even when they went up to the 4.5, it really wasn't enough to offset the emissions control. So the 3.5 is still a faster, takes off faster. I mean, not enough to really matter, runs fast. It's just a better car, the 3.5. But Mercedes figured they'd never be able to convince the German market that the 3.5 was better than the 4.5, so they didn't let them know about it.
Oh, what they didn't know wouldn't hurt them, right?
Right. So actually, it worked out good and the cars were changed after they got to the U.S. Now, my car was originally bought by the original owner in Germany. Actually, I think he bought it in Spain, according to the paperwork. But he bought it as a 3.5 before they had to change over.
So how did it end up coming to the United States?
The original owner, of all places, lived in Vidalia, Georgia. And he bought the car over there. Of course, I don't know the real story, the complete story. He bought the car there and had it shipped back to Vidalia, Georgia. And then he later moved to Portland, Oregon. And the car, he passed away years ago. And I understand the car sit in the garage maybe for 10 years or more. And then the next door neighbor purchased the car and did very little to it, maybe tires, and did a little tune-up to it, didn't do much to it. And then he eventually sold it to someone else who had it painted, and that's about all they did to it was paint it and a little tune-up.
Wow, this car is beautiful, though. And I mean, that story is kind of neglect, but the car looks beautiful. It looks so creamy, and it actually has the colors of red velvet cake, which is kind of funny. We're in Georgia.
Right.
So driving it, did you have to do a lot of maintenance on the engine or anything when you got a hold of it?
Well, not the engine, but when I got the car actually a year and a half ago, and I bought it actually sight unseen on the internet. It was a beautiful car, as you can see, recently repainted. Interior is all original, leather, carpet, everything's original.
It is beautiful.
It showed 32,000 miles, but to be honest, I don't believe that was correct. The reason I don't believe it was correct is when I got the car, I took it to a Mercedes specialist that works only on Mercedes here in Georgia. and put it on the rack, and it really had a lot of grime and grease and really a lot of use. Look underneath, this couldn't possibly be 32,000 miles. And so I did have to spend quite a bit underneath. It needed a gearbox, it needed tie rod ends, it needed shocks, it needed mufflers, it needed a good bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, it's very expensive to work on these cars, mainly the labor part. And of course, parts are 4 or 5 times the price they were years ago.
So what made you want to buy this car?
I've always been a Mercedes enthusiast. Over the 40, in fact, actually the other week I figured up over the past 40, 80 years, I've owned 12 collector Mercedes, just one at a time. And the first Mercedes I bought was in 1972. I bought a 52 300S Coupe, which is a rare model. Mercedes built the coupe for 5 years, 52 through 57, and only built 218 of them. They did build some cabriolets, but on the coupes, only 218.
So why do you like to collect Mercedes like this? What is the charm?
I'm not sure, other than the quality and the looks. I mean, the classic looks. Those, to be honest with you, I don't like the newer ones as much, because I still obviously like them. But when you look back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, the looks and the quality, I mean, they just ooze quality.
Yeah. This is a real head turner. Do you get a lot of attention in this car?
I do, actually. But as I said, I've only had it a year and a half. It's stayed 15 months in the shop doing all the stuff it needed underneath. And so I've actually only had it in my possession about three or 4 months. Only driven it less than 100 miles. Because just driving around my neighborhood, and the furthest I've driven it is here to the show today. I looked on MapQuest, it's 28.2 miles one way. That's the most. Otherwise, then I've just driven around my neighborhoods 5 miles at a time.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about your beautiful car, and best of luck to you today in the competition.
Thank you very much.